The books are beyond exceptional, and this event has been sold out for a month. I don't need to tell you this. And I'm not usually prone to being starstruck, but it's kind of like I kind of am. These poets are rock stars in my mind. I've been listening to Kim Addonizio's Poetry Blues album on repeat. She says in her memoir, "I've been struck by lightning twice in my life. Poetry was the first bolt, and blues harmonica was the second." It's both an accomplished blues album and another way to experience her 2015 collection, My Black Angel, Blues Poems and Portraits. You can download it on our website, it's on Spotify, it's perfect for a Sunday morning. Addonizio is the author of 7 poetry collections, 2 novels, 2 story collections, and 2 books on writing poetry. She has received fellowships from the NEA and Guggenheim Foundation, 2 Pushcart prizes, and was a National Book Award finalist for her collection, Tell Me. And her latest books are Mortal Trash poems and Bukowski in a Sundress, her memoir. And this is what we have for sale, a new and selected from Bloodaxe. I'm not entirely sure why I'm obsessed with this fact, but Kathryn Maris is on a trading card. Which just almost never happens unless you're an athlete or a Pokemon, you know. So I got some. I didn't get a Maris. Does anyone who wants to trade, or I don't know. I don't know if you could battle them like Pokemon, but talk to me after the show. So, Maris was born on Long Island, later moved to New York, and now lives in London. She has taught poetry at Boston University, the Gotham Writers Workshop, Morley College, Kingston University, the Arbonne Foundation, and currently the Poetry School in London. Her first full-length collections, or her full-length collections are The Book of Jobs, God Loves You, and The House with Onion Attic and a Basement. She has a chapbook called 2008, but there's only 26 copies in existence, and I don't have one. Which I'm only a little bit bitter about. And her awards include the Pushcart Prize and an Academy of American Poets Award. I woke up thinking about this quote today, and I think it fits some of the speakers in Kim and Kathryn's poems. It's from Jane Bowles, and it goes, "I'm so wily and feminine that I could live by your side for a lifetime and deceive you afresh each day." There's the intelligence and understanding of the human condition in their work. They really nail the unsatisfactoriness of life. There are so many other things going on in their poems. They connect with the speakers in their poems who confront the darkness, who feel that reality is itchy and that peace of mind is a difficult thing to hold on to. And just one final quote from writer Ralph Ellison. It's a quote about the blues, but it can be directly applied to Kim and Kathryn's work. "The blues is an impulse to keep the painful details and episodes of a brutal experience alive in one's aching consciousness, to finger its jagged grain and to transcend it, not by the consolation of philosophy, but by squeezing from it a near-tragic, near-comic lyricism." So Kim Addonizio will read first, followed by Kathryn Maris. So let's show them how excited we are.
Thank you, and thanks to everybody who's responsible for me being here. And I kept thinking, trading cards, Kathryn Maris, Roger Maris. I'll take Kathryn. So I'm sorry I have my phone on, but I'm going to try to keep track of my time. So I'm going to start with Lives of the Poets, and I imagine some of you are, so there are a lot of poets referenced in this. Keats, Larkin, Hopkins, Heaney, although it's a shovel and not a spade, Millay, Rethke, Berryman, Jack Gilbert. Lives of the Poets. One stood among the violets listening to a bird. One went to the toilet and was struck by the moon. One felt hopeless until a trumpet crashed, and then lo, he became a diamond. I have a shovel. Can I turn it into a poem? On my stove I'm boiling some milk thistle. I hope it will turn into a winged thesis before you stop reading. Look, I'm topless. Listen, approaching hooves. One drowned in a swimming pool. One removed his shoes and yearned off a bridge. One lives with Alzheimer's in a state facility, spittle in his white beard. It turns out words are no help. But here I am with my shovel, digging like a fool beside the spilth and splosh of the ungirdled sea. Marvin's in here too. I can't stop. The horses are coming. The thieves. I still haven't found lasting love. I still want to hear viols in the little beach hotel that's torn down and gone. I want to see again the fish schooling and glittering like a veil where the waves shove against the breakwater. Gone is the girl in her white slip, testing the chill with one bare foot. It's too cold, but she goes in so carefully. Oh. And this is, I know a woman not well, but she's an acquaintance, and her husband's a sort of well-known comedian. It's like the I Am Pagliacci. She told me one day that he was affected with seasonal affective disorder, otherwise known with the acronym SAD. So I was thinking about that. Seasonal affective disorder. Whoever came up with the acronym must have been happy to think of everyone in winter walking around saying, I have SAD, instead of, this time of year when the light leaves early and intimations of colder hours settle over the houses like the great oppressive oily scoots of a dragon's belly, I feel, I don't know, a sense of ennui, listlessness, or lassitude, but more than that, a definite undertow of dread spreading over the waters of my already not exactly sunny to begin with soul, if one can even speak of the soul anymore, which is part of the problem, isn't it? I mean, how do I even know if I have one, given I'm essentially a secular humanist and missing whatever constellation or holy smurf guides people through their lives, Jesus or Muhammad, and then either Muhammad's son or second in command, depending on who you thought was the true successor, which is only one of the problems still being worked out by wars and car bombings, just as similar problems were solved in earlier times by flambeing people in public after rack-induced confessions. And if there's no immortal soul, it's soon, too soon if you ask me, to be either whirled up to heaven like a cow shining in a tornado, or else hauled screaming into the underworld like a pig to a scalding tank. That is, if we just, stop, the filament worn out, or shooting through the glass and exploding the bulb. But either way, done for, pure nothing, the socket empty for long enough to hear some prayers or poems, and then another little light bulb screwed into place with songs and lullabies, and eventually loud music and drugs, which maybe I should be taking to overcome this thing I hardly know how to describe, and which hardly anyone wants to hear about, since who can think too long about such matters before all they want is a drink, or a quiet place to curl up, or TV to turn on along with every light in the house, end quote. And when your lover, parentheses, if you are lucky enough to have one, even if you sometimes feel bored and stifled by him/her, or that maybe you could have done better, especially in terms of having more sex, money, complex conversations, a heavier lift for your nobly woeful statue. asks, "What's wrong?" You can forget all this and say simply, "I am sad." Since everyone knows that diagnosis is the first step, though on which stair or ladder is better left unmentioned, since they lead either way, but are best traveled with someone steadying the rungs or waiting at the top or bottom with a candle, a word, a cup of something hot and not too bitter that you can drink down and proclaim good. I've lost my sentence. I thought I was so prepared. Okay, I'm going to do a couple sonnets. So I love sonnets. They're amazing little, it's like splitting the atom to get something inside a sonnet. And then, you bust it open. So a couple. I had this idea that one of my many bright ideas, I thought, I was just getting into jazz, and as I had this whole list of the titles of jazz poems, or jazz songs rather, that I hoped would one day become jazz poems. My idea was just to improvise off the titles of jazz tunes, and like many of those bright ideas, I wrote a lot and ended up with maybe like 4 or 5. I thought I was going to have a book. I ended up with a handful of poems that seemed workable. But this is one. It's called Stolen Moments. What happened once, so now it's best in memory. An orange he sliced, the skin unbroken, then the knife, the chilled wedge lifted to my mouth, his mouth, the thin membrane between us, the exquisite orange, tongue, orange, my nakedness and his, the way he pushed me up against the fridge. Now I get to feel his hands again, the kiss that didn't last, but sent some neural twin flashing wildly through the cortex. Love's merciless, the way it travels in and keeps emitting light. Beside the stove, we ate an orange, and there were purple flowers on the table, and we still had ours. And this other sonnet is, I wrote it in response to a sonnet by George Meredith called Lucifer in Starlight. And the basic premise of that was that Lucifer comes up from hell to, cause some damage and, floats around and ends up getting sort of beat down by the angels. And the basic message of the poem is like good triumphing over evil. And I thought, well, I don't know about that. So I ended up writing sort of a response to George Meredith called Lucifer at the Starlight, as in the Starlight Lounge. So the premise of this poem is the devil walks into a bar. And I wrote this before the inauguration of our current president. But you can imagine if he drank. I don't even know what that would be like. It would be kind of great, actually. Maybe he'd just get so drunk he'd forget that he was president. That would be a very good thing. Lucifer at the Starlight. Here's my bright idea for life on Earth: better management. The CEO has lost touch with the details. I'm worth as much, but I care. I come down here, I show my face, I'm a real regular. A toast to our boys and girls in the war, grinding through sand. To everybody here, our host who's mostly mist, like methane rising from retreating ice shelves. Put me in command. For every town we'll have a marching band. For each thoroughbred, a comfortable stable. For each worker, a place beneath the table. For every forward step, a stumbling. A shadow over every starlit thing. Oh wow, I think that's my old, I had this totally revised list. Okay, I know where I'm going now. I'm one of those, I'm a Leo, but I have a lot of Virgo in me, so it makes me really fucked up because when half of me is whatever. The other half is nail it down. So it creates a lot of stuff in my head. Actually, I'm not going to read this long drinking poem I was going to read you, but I heard that the people in Ireland, this is my first time in Ireland, I'm really happy to be here, and I heard you guys like to drink, and so I had written this little drinking ditty based on Dorothy Parker's poem Resume. Do you guys know that? Yeah. I can't see any of you, but I guess okay. So anyway, I wrote my own little drinking song sort of based on her poem Resume, which I'm not totally sure I can remember, because I had a drink before I came here, so I don't know if I remember this or not. But I can't find it, so I'm gonna have to, so. Okay. Families shame you, rehab's a scam. Lovers drain you and don't give a damn. Friends are distracted, aging stinks. You'll soon be subtracted, you might as well drink. I always thought that, somebody says like, who would you like to go to dinner with? I always thought like Dorothy Parker, Jean Reese, and Ed Millay. And we all get profoundly drunk. I hear people use the word profoundly a lot this week, so I was like, I want to use it. We would all get just profoundly drunk and shit-faced at a table together and whine or cry or whatever we would do. I think that would be like an amazing experience. So I want to read this one that Patrick, who kindly invited me here this year. Last year I sent work to the competition and I was happy to get third prize and for this poem, and I thought I would read it to you. For years I wanted to write a mono-rhymed poem, and finally I did, so this is one I ended up writing. And it's called Black Hour Blues. So, Black Hour Blues. Nothing is the new black's shit soundtrack. The elk's black blood leaks from the roof rack. Black the prospects of the destitute sick. Blackberries separate in the pie tin. Green cards burnt black in the gas-lit oven. Black mold loitering in the privacy of prison. Black deep-water horizon, pelican and dolphin, through standing rock a black worm crawls. Black Baltimore, Mali, Iraq, Sudan, Cambodia, Sinai, Selma, The darkling beetle raises its black back and runs through the black ghost ship and Grenville Tower ruins. Black Syria, Somalia, Ferguson, Attica, Gaza, Yemen, Black heart weighed against an ostrich plume. Blindfolded goddess, long sword drawn, somewhere in the come down, come down. I was thinking about that today and thinking that sort of like Claudia Rankine's book-length poem Citizen, I think she has kept adding names at the beginning to Black Americans killed by police, and I thought, well, this is one too that you could sort of add. And I just watched a Netflix documentary today on the Miami the Miami Chauvin massacre, and what happened to them, and the way they've been sort of uncovering the truth and finding justice, and the ending of this poem, talks about that figure of justice with the black heart and the heart and the ostrich plume are the two things that justice holds in balance, and she's blindfolded and she's got her sword. And so I was thinking, well, that's a poem that could also maybe accommodate a lot of continual, when I was thinking about what to choose to put in it, it was like, well, I could put lots of other things in it as well. So it feels like those are sort of slots that are open, unfortunately, all the time for more editions. So now that we've got the blues, I'm going to go to a couple poems that are from a blues book that James mentioned. Thank you for that introduction, James. One thing is that this The New and Selected by Bloodaxe was very cool because I got to put in a lot of poems from different books that I liked. And one was a blues book that I did that had a CD accompanying it and music and beautiful woodcuts by this artist. And I thought it would be interesting to end with some blues. This is a blues poem that I wrote for this little collaboration I had with this woodcut artist. And actually, I should say, just for the geeks among us, which I know there are many, the first poem I read live to the poets, all of the end words of the lines were made out of letters from the title, which is a little old thing I stole from Terence Hayes, American poet. And the same thing is true of this cigar box banjo. Sort of a Monty Yoke and the Acorn kind of poem. Blind Willie Johnson could coax music from a single string. God plucked a rib and found a woman. Concert aria in the gypsy song, long groan of orgasm in the first kiss, plastic bag of heroin ripening in the poppy fields. Right now, in a deep pocket of a politician's brain, a bad idea is traveling along an axon to make sure the future resembles a cobra rather than an ocarina. Still there's hope in every cartoon bib, above which a tiny, unfinished skull, in its beneficence, dispenses a drooling grin. The heart may be a trashy organ, but when it plucks its shiny banjo, I see blue wings in the rain. So I started learning blues harmonica in my 40s. It was that second lightning hit. And then, of course, eventually I wanted to put it together with my poetry, but it's really hard to play the harmonica. I don't know what you want me to do. So I ended up figuring out a couple ways to do it. But one thing that I used to do at the end of my readings was to do a train song that I had figured out. And I would just sort of announce it. It's like Happy Body is, hi, I'm going to play a train song now. And one day it occurred to me that I should actually write some train poems. So I did write a couple, and this is one of them in the form of a blues, and it's called Northeast Corridor Blues, and that's a route on Amtrak in America that goes down the East Coast. Northeast Corridor Blues. Lost my ticket when I got on the train. Conductor said, sorry, you gotta pay again. If he was a rock, I'd be a speck of sand. Passing yards of junked cars, their hoods popped open. Water towers, trailer parks, local taverns, gone as soon as you look at them. Traveling down to D.C. to bury my mother. Put her ashes next to the bones of my father. Tell the priest he won't have to bother. Everyone's a stone, but I'm a speck of sand. No matter what I do, I've got to pay again. Lost my ticket when I got on the train. And I want to read to you also a beautiful poem by Ruth Stone about a train before I play my little train song and feel justified in doing that. So this is a poem by Ruth Stone that I just, I'm totally jealous, which is how I know it's a good poem. I wish I could. It's called Train Ride. All things come to an end. Small calves in Arkansas, the bend of the muddy river. Do all things come to an end? No, they go on forever. They go on forever. The swamp, the vine-choked cypress, the oaks rattling last year's leaves, the thump of the rails, the kite, the still white stilted heron. All things come to an end. The red clay bank, the spread hawk, the bodies riding this train, the stalled truck, pale sunlight, the talk goes on forever. The wide, dry field of geese, a man stopped near his porch to watch. Release, release. Between cold death and a fever, send what you will, I will listen. All things come to an end. No, they go on forever. Isn't that beautiful? It just blows me away every time. So now we're ready for train song, right? This is my, this is sort of my mashup of two songs by an early blues harmonica master named Ford Bailey, who was actually the first African American to play at the Grand Ole Opry before it was even called that. And ended up getting shafted by the music industry because all of these songs that he had loved to play, that his audience had loved, suddenly, there were copyright issues and he didn't play them anymore, and he ended up shining shoes at the end of his life and, dying in poverty like a lot of those guys. But anyway, so this is my tribute to him. All aboard?
Kim is my rock star. As an American poet, I've been familiar with and reading her work for a couple of decades, so I feel like, and now she's like literally a rock star with the jazz harmonica. So thanks for that brilliant reading. I'm sure it's not uncommon as we age, the time can start to feel elastic. And in my head, my children were little only a second ago. And likewise, I feel like it was a second ago that I was a little girl. This first poem describes an accident in my childhood and then bounces to an accident that occurred when my daughter was small. It's a violent poem, but the narrative is shrouded in unreliability. The summer day the spike went into my brother's head, as such things happened in the 20th century when the Freudian death drive was often accessed out of boredom. I learned from my doctor parents that scalps bleed profusely. 20 years later, when Theodore and Cosima jumped on little Robert's bed and Theodore fell off and his white blonde head turned red, I said, "Scalps bleed profusely," and Rachel, his mum, thanked me for my composure. Robert's mom, Emily, who had wanted to be a jazz singer or actress and who always introduced me as a poetess, said she knew a couple who had a second child because their friend's child died in a freak accident. But back to the summer day the spike grazed my brother's scalp. I slept beside him in his racing car bed, and my father woke me and slapped my face, thinking, I assume, of sex, whereas I was already thinking about death. If you heard David Harson read last night, he described his poems as fictions. And I'm similarly interested in poetry's fictional possibilities, even though many people seem to assume that poems are lineated little memoir pieces. I've tried to find different ways to try to create fictions, and one of the more counterintuitive ways was to use pieces of found text and distort them or repurpose them, or combine them with fictive elements to make something more like soap opera or satire. So this next poem uses text from a WhatsApp group for school parents and repurposes them, using as its structure a tiny play by Gertrude Stein, which she wrote in 1916 using voices overheard in the interval of an opera. I wrote my little play 100 years later in 2016 and gave it the same title as hers. It's also my attempt as an American to capture a British way of communicating a particular voice that still feels quite foreign to me. Ladies' voices. Curtain raiser. Everyone has gone, but the barbecue is here. Is someone coming back for it? William is going back for it tomorrow. Ah, that belongs to William. William is going back tomorrow. What a successful weekend overall. Did anyone see a white china salad bowl? I'm looking for a plastic container with a red strip around the edge. Weren't we fortunate with the weather? Weren't we lucky? Wow, what a race. What a race indeed. Act 2. Accident on the M4 by the exit to the M25. We're stuck in it too. We are through. I'm driving Rupert, Henry, and the dog. Are you there yet? You will be fine. I was caught too. The rain is driving at an angle. Where are you all? We're all here. Where are you? Act 3. First Brexit, now this. What a week, so sad. I feel the way I did last Friday, totally bereft. Those boys are lucky with their great British strengths, calm under pressure, humility, and humor. Nick was telling us how he read the Odyssey. That will stand them in good stead. Act 4. What a shame, big loss. It's a very difficult time, equally painful. I saw them laughing. Epilogue. His father has been given 1 month to live. He's not ill at all. Does anybody have Nurofen? Oh dear, was it raining? Gosh, I will miss it and you very much. Congratulations and best wishes for the future. What a fabulous memory. Wasn't it just a special and wonderful occasion? The baton is well and truly passed. This next poem is about an unhappy flatmate situation. But to my mind, it's also about the body versus the mind and conflicts within ourselves. It's called The House with Only an Attic and a Basement. The woman in the attic did not have visitors. The man in the basement gave parties that were popular. The woman in the attic had mononucleosis. The man in the basement had type 1 diabetes. The woman in the attic listened to audiobooks, which the man in the basement held in disdain. The door to the attic swelled in some weathers. In order to shut, it had to be slammed. There is a way in which the man opened sentences, as in, there is a way in which to close a door so it doesn't slam. The woman in the attic took cautious walks to build her strength. The man in the basement pointedly said, some of us have ailments which are not manufactured. The man in the basement wrote stories about heroin. The woman in the attic read stories with heroines. The woman in the attic noticed a bruise that ran from top to the base of her thigh. The bruise looked like Europe. The man in the basement was in love with the sister of the secretive man who loved him more. He whooped to the woman, "You killed your student?" To himself he wept, "I killed my father." The man in the basement, recently divorced, was left with literally 2 possessions. The woman in the attic purchased books on psychopathology. The man in the basement produced fecal matter that blocked the pipes in both attic and basement. The woman in the attic produced nothing at all. The woman in the attic was a waste of space. The man in the basement had sex almost daily. The woman in the attic had panic attacks. The man in the basement had only one rule. The woman in the attic was banned from his bedroom. But once she stole in and lay on his bed in his absence, or perhaps he was absent because she was there. The man in the basement moved to the West Coast. The woman in the attic crossed the Atlantic, whereas the house with the attic and basement saw states of fumigation, exorcism, detoxification, and rehabilitation. So when I was a girl, I imagined myself as a poet, which is what I always wanted to be. I had expected there to be a lot more nature or something in my poems, and a lot less hurling, as in the Irish sport hurling. I don't have to explain what hurling is to the majority of this audience, but if you're American or otherwise unfamiliar with hurling, you sort of have to see it for yourself to understand, because it's not really comparable to anything that we do, except, well, it's maybe comparable to something like Quidditch from the Harry Potter books. But when you're next at the Cork airport, look for the statue of the hurling champion, Christy Ring. So this next poem, The H-Man, is part of a sequence of tall tales about powerful men, and this is by far the nicest one. So it's dedicated to all the former hurlers in this audience. The H-Man. His superpower was being the subject of ever taller tales about his prowess at hurling, a sport with prehistoric Gaelic origins where players use hurleys, sticks, on a slitter, ball, aiming it over the crossbar of the goalpost for 1 point or under the crossbar of the goalpost and into the net for 3. Considered to be the fastest player ever in a sport known to be the world's fastest field sport, the H-Man once broke the nose of an opponent with his force plus his velocity, though some say he broke his ribs or legs. He did not go professional, because hurling remains an amateur sport, but he did become a poet because that profession does exist. Okay, so this next poem is a sestina that mentions a hurley. It's basically an unpunctuated rant in which a woman harangues her poet husband. It's called Darling, Would You Please Pick Up Those Books? How many times do I have to say, get rid of the books off the goddamn floor? Do you have any idea how it feels to step over books you wrote about her? Bloody hell, you sadist. What kind of man are you? All day long, those fecking books in my way. For 3 years, your acclaimed books. Tell me now, what do you have to say for yourself? You think you're such a man, silent, brooding, pondering at the floor, pretending you're bored when I mention her. Fine, change the subject. Ask, do I feel like I need more medication? No, I don't feel like I need more medication. It's the books, don't you see? Don't you see? It's her. Why don't you listen to anything I say? And for God's sake, books on the floor are a safety hazard. Remember that man from Cork who nearly died. Fine, that man fell over a hurley, not a book. But I don't feel you're getting the point. The point is that a floor is not an intelligent place for books. Books I have to see, and books that say exactly where and how you shagged her, what shirt she wore before you shagged her. I can write a book too about some man, better still about you. I can say something to demonize you. How would you feel about that? Ha ha. Why don't I write a book about how I hoover your sodding floor and how you've never once hoovered your floor? Why can't I be a muse? Why can't I be a her? What does one have to do to be in a book around here? Do I have to be dead for a man to write a poem? How do you think it feels to be non-muse material? Can't you say you feel for me what you felt for her? Can't you say I'm better than that woman? Can't you get those books off the floor? So some poets mythologize themselves in their poems or use their poems as a way of foregrounding their virtues, political or otherwise, but my poems don't do that, as you've probably gathered. They're a place in which I can put kind of the ugliest facets of my imagination or perceptions so that I can do my best to be sort of gentle and sane in the real world. In this next poem, I confess my sins, real, invented, and exaggerated. This is a confessional poem. I am guilty of so much destruction it hardly matters anymore. There are so many thank you notes I never wrote that sometimes I'm relieved by the deaths of would-be recipients so I can finally let go of the shame. I was awful to someone who was attached to the phrase social polish as though she'd acquire it through repetition. I took an overdose at a child's 6th birthday party. I was born in a country which some have called the Big Satan. I abandoned the country for one that is called the Little Satan. I wished ill on a woman who has known me for years and yet never remembers who I am, and now she's involved in a public scandal. I have been at parties where I was boring. I have been at parties where I was deadly boring. I have worn the wrong clothes to sacraments, not for lack of outfits, but for a temporary failure of taste. I'm a terrible, terrible liar, and everything I say is full of misrepresentation. I once knew a very sweet girl who stabbed herself in the abdomen 7 times. She believed she was evil and thought 7 was a holy number. Besides that, she was sane and told me her tale out of kindness, because guilt recognizes guilt the way a mother can identify her own child. I met her in a class called Poetry Therapy, in which the assignment was to complete this statement: when one door closes, another opens. I wrote, at the end of my suffering, there was a door, making me guilty of both plagiarism and lack of imagination. I was the vortex of suffering, present, future, and retroactive suffering. The girl tried to absolve me. Don't be Jesus, she said. There are enough around here. I know I should thank her if she's alive, but I also know it's unlikely I'll rise to the task. Okay, so I'm going to read 3 little poems from a little sequence called The House of Atreus, which pretends to be a loose contemporary retelling of the Oresteia by Aeschylus using modern-day characters. My ethnic background is Greek. My grandparents all emigrated from Sparta in the early part of the 20th century, and I actually had an aunt, Iphigenia, and a distant cousin called Orestes. So I relate to this ancient, dysfunctional Spartan family. Each poem is a fictional little monologue spoken by a different member of the ancient family. The poems are usually in syllabics using found text, and they're all very short. Clytemnestra. I'm obsessed with my health, which I guess is a capitalist construct. I put a codicil in my will in case my son is orphaned. I bought a bed with my husband's annex after my visa was declined from overuse. The salesman misheard the X in my postcode is S, so I said X like exit, and Aegisthus shook his head because exit doesn't really begin with X. I transferred money to my husband's account. Orestes. Because I want to be around negativity as little as possible, I avoid my sister, though I wish she were more hospitable. I've made a scrupulous dossier of her insanity, and I BCC my parents on all our correspondence. Quoting Melanie Klein, she claims she's the family scapegoat when we all know she inherited bad genes. I'm not married to our father, as she unattractively taunts, but I do respect his business acumen, especially the hotels. No one sacrificed anyone. My unfamilial sister gave herself willingly to whatever she worshipped. And Electra. I am signing none of the emails with an X because whatever affection he feels for me is not being transferred. Affection is not a currency. I can't make him feel affection just as he is failing to make me feel affection. I am anxious about my appointment with the GP, though I feel better than I did last year and the year before. I arrived Saturday. The flight was fine except for snafus at JFK, immigration queues, misplaced bags, then arrestees didn't turn up, so I hailed a taxi. We got lost because I don't know the way from the Northern State Parkway. Dad scolded the driver for lacking a GPS, then gave him $100, which sums up my dad. First the meanness, and then the reward. Now moving from the mythological to the theological, I'll end with a short sequence, 3 short poems that retell the story of St. Kathryn of the Wheel, who was put to death on a breaking wheel, or a Kathryn wheel, but it shattered when she touched it, or so the story goes. The first 2 poems are written in the third person, and the final one shifts to the first person. So thank you everyone for listening, and thank you to Patrick Cotter and everyone involved in this festival for inviting me to take part, and for all your hard work, and for treating us readers with such warmth and generosity. So just to restate, I'm reading 3 little poems to end. Kathryn in her wheel, 1. Kathryn, who was a saint, was inseparable from her wheel. She carried it everywhere, including on dog walks and visits to the old people's home. She slept next to it in bed. Her boyfriend said, "Sometimes I feel that you and your wheel are the couple, whereas I am the third wheel." Kathryn replied, "Do you know how long this wheel has been in my family? Since we were primates, that's how long. One day it will belong to my children." Kathryn and her wheel, 2. After a few years of marriage, it became clear to her husband that Kathryn was less a saint than a victim, as in everyone had wronged her. Meanwhile, the spiky wheel became a hazardous object of rivalry among their young children. Kathryn's husband basically became Jesus in order to cope. He joked, "I'm changing my name to Jesus." The children asked, "What's Jesus?" "I'm Jesus," he said. "That's what Jesus is." And Kathryn and her wheel, heartbreak. When my teachers grew old and died, when my friends went spare and spare, when small islands suffered from the new weather, when my children found me offensively morbid, when my looks officially went, when my enemies became friends, became rivals, became allies, became masters, became servants, until we lacked energy for anything, even escape from our celebrated cities, whose skylines transition from greatness to perfect meaninglessness, as when a person loses her mind, like my cohorts who were going crazier and crazier, until I wondered, is this sensitive aging? What the heck is going on here? I knew nothing, and the nothing I knew was more profoundly nothing even than the nothing we know at our rarest, bottom, most humblest moments, because usually we know one thing. We know we're not dead, or that Apple has a feminine article in French, but this was absolute zero, like when a saint fell off a horse, then into a coma, then woke up and said to another saint that there was nothing, that there was nada de nada, the most perfect Spanish expression, the most beautiful and poetic circle, the nothing wheel, the wheel I have carried through all roots of my life, the wheel I was fundamentally wedded to, my true beloved. Watch me touch it now, look at it, nothing.
In poems you read and just in your poems in general, there's a lot of talk, directly or indirectly, just about the big questions, God, the soul, death. Say, like, outside of poetry, if you didn't write poetry, is this something that you just do you think about this kind of stuff a lot? Would it? Do you naturally just wonder about this stuff all the time, or what's your? experience with that.
I don't think my microphone is working. Is it? I don't think I know how to turn it on. Why don't you go first?
Okay, well, then you can have this one.
Okay.
Yes, all the time I think about that stuff, constantly, yeah. I sit at a stoplight in traffic and I think it's all like creation and destruction all the time. I do, and then I think, why am I having these thoughts? But yeah,
Has it always been that way?
I don't know. But it is now. That's all I can say. It is pretty much now.
Kathryn?
Thanks. Yeah, I think that's maybe partly what makes us poets or something. I feel like if I weren't thinking about those things all the time and I could think about something, a little more practical or something, like I would be doing something that paid more or, I don't know, be like an occupational therapist or something. But I do think about all these things. And my second book, God Loves You, I think, some people felt that it was quite satirical, and I guess I always do a bit of satire, but it's never like all satire. There's seriousness as well, and I had this quite strict Greek Orthodox upbringing, and so there was a lot of sort of God and religion in my background.
But you mentioned that you expected that, when you were a kid and you were thinking, I'm going to be a poet, so you'd be, talking about nature and that kind of expectation versus reality. So I'll put that to you, Kim. What for you it is, where you are, like, expectations versus reality of being a poet?
I wanted to be a musician from an early. I started playing music about the age of 14, and and the reason I wanted to be a musician was because there was some kind of magic that I experienced when I listened to music, and I wanted to get hold of some of that magic, and so I wanted to be a musician for many years, and in my late 20s is when I got gobsmacked. That's a good British word, right? Yeah. We're not in Britain, are we? It's not in Britain anymore, as far as I know. So yeah, but then when I got hit by poetry, it was just sort of like, oh, there's magic in that, and I had sort of been failing to find it or achieve it in music, and so poetry became the thing that I found that as a way to access that space in my head and that space in the world that was other, basically, than reality, or than the sort of reality that was offered. So that was kind of why I gravitated in that direction. What about you?
When I said that I was imagining more nature in my poetry, I was, when I was a little girl, very moved by nature, and but somehow I think it's that placelessness, it's the thing of not knowing where I belong and kind of indecisively moving back and forth between the US and then kind of being in London, and I think sometimes it helps to feel you belong somewhere, to really like love the land or something, or really, so I guess. But interestingly, I've kind of become more interested in ecological matters now, because I think we kind of have to be. So I wouldn't be surprised. I think life is surprising that way if my poetry did take a turn in that direction, even though I never, in many years, thought it would.
Something else you mentioned as well was poetry as a place to put the ugly side of your psyche, so you can stay sane. I've read an interview where you're kind of skeptical of the poetry as being a therapeutic idea, but I suppose my question is does that work, or how does that kind of work for you? Does it work for you to,
I think what I was saying up on the podium just now was slightly different than the idea of poetry as therapy. It's more the idea of I don't have to put my best self or something in my poems. Like, what is our self anyway? And I guess Melanie Klein had this theory of projective. She was a psychoanalyst, and she had a theory of projective identification. So if you have like two children, say, Sometimes, like, there's one favored child and one not favored child, and the not favored child is where the parents project all their own bad stuff onto, and then like all of their good qualities get projected onto the favored child. So I thought, I'm a parent, so I thought, well, I'm not going to do that with my children. I'm not going to do that with people. So I'm going to like put all my bad qualities on my poems. You know, like it became a way to kind of not kind of be unpleasant to people out in the world or something, you know, like be unpleasant to my poems, but my poems keep rather than like have my poems be this perfect self or something, contain this perfect self, and then kind of be an asshole out in the world or something. That's how, and I feel like it's not perfect. I mean, we're none of us are perfect in our dealings with other people, but I think it does help somewhat to just sort of examine the worst aspects of ourselves, and then you kind of understand the world's better, I think.
Yeah, no, I'm so happy we're talking about this because I loved your confessional style poem, and I've been writing one also called confessional poetry, and sort of that whole thing, thinking about that, and it's a fiction basically, and I've always said that. I just felt like, you know, you are doing a performance in language, and I've never, you know, I mean, early on I sort of separated myself from the things I was writing and felt like, no, I'm making a poem, I'm not trying to, you know, and so I love that you read that, and I love that poem, and I think that's just so interesting because people do always identify the poet in a way that they don't the fiction writer, you know, even though it's always a record of our obsessions and a map of our psyche in some important way, it's still, you are creating something, you're creating this person in language that's not really you. You know, I think it's great if you can put it all there and not be an asshole in person. I'm sort of like, I don't think I'm an asshole really, but I wish I could sort of just put it all in the poems and not have to bleed through into life, you know. But it is a place to do that. It's sort of like, yeah, that's this other self or created self or some aspect of the self, and when people take that as your entire self or take it as pure autobiography, they're missing the whole point of what we're up to, I think, as poets, you know. So I think it's really great that you like said that and wrote what you wrote in that poem, because I was just like, yes, exactly, like I have to read that now and think about it because it's going to help me write what it's called.